Welcome back. Well, the Occupy protests spreading across Canada over the weekend landed in more than a dozen cities from coast to coast. Many feared the demonstrations would bring back memories of the 2010 G20 protests in Toronto. But how are the police handling this crowd this time? For his thoughts, we're joined by security expert Wretham, the co-CEO of the Investigative Solutions Network. Good to have you with us this morning.
Thanks, Alex. Good to be here.
You were with ETF, Emergency Task Force, the Toronto Police for many,
Yes.
30 years you were with the police force?
32 years, yes.
So you have a bit of experience when it comes to things like crowd control or these kinds of situations that can be volatile. What goes into policing this situation following something like G20 with all the hindsight now?
Yeah, the eyes are really on Toronto Police Service on this one because of what happened in G20, and and they're cognizant of that, I'm sure. From what I've seen so far, they've done a great job of not only policing the group, but monitoring what's going on, staying well back. The police have a difficult task. They have to protect property. They have to protect the citizens of Toronto, but they also have to protect the protesters from themselves. So it's a real tightrope that the police walk in this situation. But right now, I believe they would be gathering intelligence and just waiting to see what happens.
So from the footage and the images that I have seen so far, in Canada anyway, in Toronto, you've seen some police, bike units.
Yes.
Not a lot of presence, unlike G20 when you had just mountains. I mean, just level of officers.
Right.
You could definitely tell they were bracing for something. So do they have just that many police, or do they have more on the outside that we're not seeing, watching, ready to move in?
There would be more on the outside that we're not seeing. I mean, clearly they have to be prepared for the worst if something happens. So there would be a contingent on the outside in case something happened that would be prepared to move in and be at the ready.
When would they move in? What would prompt them then to take action? Clearly they don't want a repeat of what happened at G20, but what would signal them that it's time to move in?
Well, again, I mean, the police have a responsibility in a situation like this to protect the citizens of Toronto, the community. They have an obligation to protect property and protect the protesters from themselves, as I said. So if one of those three areas are breached, the police would step it up and move in and take the appropriate action to protect and preserve life and property.
With what we've seen in Greece, the escalation of violence there, with what we've seen in London with the violence there, what is it about policing these situations that makes it so challenging? Because everyone has the right to protest, but the protesters today are not maybe, like what we've seen in the past, not in Canada anyway. You've not seen this kind of violence.
Yes. Well, at this point, the police would be gathering information. It's trying to. What makes it really difficult is trying to anticipate what's going to happen and be at the ready. They don't want to overreact. They don't want to make Toronto look like an armed camp again. But at the same time, they've got to be at the ready and prepared to move at a moment's notice. Yeah,
because we can both agree that mistakes were made the last time, and I would think that Mr. Chief Bill Blair has a lot of pressure to make sure that does not happen again.
Oh, absolutely, Alex. And the eyes of the city, the eyes of the country are on Toronto Police on this one because of what happened at G20. And clearly, we're human, and yes, there were mistakes made at G20s, no question. But I believe the Toronto Police would be really cognizant of that, and I'm sure they've learned a lot. I think they were a little bit unprepared. It was very short notice in retrospect, the amount of time they had to prepare. But from what I see, they're doing a great job this time.
Right. And these protesters have said openly that they don't want problems.
Right.
They're not looking for it. But it only takes one guy, one person in the crowd to start, and then the mob mentality ignites.
Exactly.
So do you foresee any problems like this happening with a crowd like this as time goes on and maybe their message isn't being heard?
Well, from what I've seen so far, it doesn't look like we're going to get there. However, I think we're all watching to see what happens this morning when they go down to the stock exchange. I know a lot of people thought it was kind of comical that they protested down in the financial district on a Saturday. However, I thought that was somewhat respectful of the protesters to do it on a Saturday and not disrupt the financial district.
Right.
Now they're changing gears a little bit this morning, and they are going to go to the financial district. So we'll see what happens when they go down there. It'll be interesting to see how this unfolds
See
today.
if they provoke the suits
Yes.
walking by and see
Exactly.
what
And I
happens.
think if something's going to happen, it'll happen down there today.
We will be watching. Thank
We
you
will.
for your insight.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate it. And that is Ron Wretham. He's a security expert and co-CEO of Investigative Solutions Networks, joining us today. We are taking a quick break here on the Roundtable. Your viewer email is next. You had a lot to say about these protests. We'll be right back.